QSO Today episode 215, Mike Bryce WB8VGE. This episode of QSO Today is sponsored by ICOM America, makers of the finest HF, VHF, and UHF transceivers for every level of amateur radio operator, and by QRP Labs, makers of the QCX single-band transceiver kit. Please support the QSO Today podcast by supporting these fine sponsors. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth4Z1UG, your host. My guest this week is Mike Bryce, WB8VGE, who collects and restores old Heathkit and Drake rigs that we remember from the 60s and 70s. He works QRP on his favorite Ten-Tec transceivers and has enough solar electric power to run everything. WB8VGE shares his background of all of these things and his current view on the state of ham radio in this QSO Today. WB8VGE, this is Eric 4Z1UG. Are you there, Mike?
Sure, I'm Eric.
Mike, thanks for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
I guess probably the biggest thing was the surge of CB back in the early 1970s. Doug got wrapped up in that a little bit, decided that I wanted to play with the big boys, so changed from flirting around with that to my novice license, and in 1975 the FCC gave me WN8VGE, and it was all uphill from there. Home brewing.
Did you have an interest in electronics even before that? Were you building any electronic stuff when you were a kid?
Oh, heavens, yes. My first radio was a Remco crystal radio set that my dad bought for Christmas, and it was a no solder kind of a put the wires in point A and point B type of thing. And then when we got that, we hung a wire up the tree and didn't hear anything. Till the next day I picked up on the local broadcast stations, and that was the only radio station I could hear. But that just kind of sparked my interest, and it was crazy in radio. And then from there, as I got older, the Allied Electronics catalog would come out, and I just wanted a star roamer, a night star roamer, so bad I could taste it. But my dad worked at the steel mill at the time, and star roamer was like 2 weeks of wages for him, so that just never happened. But yeah, back in the heyday, back in the 70s, mid-70s, 80s, you had popular electronics, elementary electronics, radio and TV magazines. I mean, the plethora of magazines. And, of course, you'd buy them and come home and look at all the neat stuff they built, and didn't really have any money to build anything, but the dreams were there.
But the catalogs were sure fun. I think one of my favorite was the Lafayette Electronics catalog.
Yes, Lafayette, Bernstein Appleby. I loved reading the Bernstein Appleby, because not only did they sell the radio stuff, they sold all kinds of odd, strange things. Olson Electronics up in Akron, Ohio, was the place to go, because they'd have assemblies of radio chassis and cassette chassis and just, all kinds of odds and ends. And, basically it was surplus junk. But at the time, it was unique surplus junk.
How old were you when you got your novice license?
Oh, I was, that was 1975, so I was mid-20s, I guess.
So you were kind of a late bloomer. It was if the CB radio surge hadn't happened, you might not have found your way into amateur radio?
Oh, probably would have. It was one of those things I've always wanted to do. But at the time, we're kind of rural. And if you wanted to get your ham license, like 1969, that meant you had to drive to Detroit, Michigan, to the FCC office to take your test. And there again, Dad worked at the steel mill. He worked a swing shift. And to have him drive me all the way to Detroit, Michigan, just wasn't going to happen. Then, of course, there were no local clubs that I knew of at the time, although later found out the Massillon Amateur Radio Club, W8NP, has been around since the 20s, but I did not know that when I was 15 years old. And I could have probably had somebody give me the test or taken me up to Detroit with some of the other novices, but that just never happened.
Once you got your license, did you have any mentors at that point that helped you along to get you to the next level?
No. And you know what, Eric? I absolutely hate. Oh, I'd just as soon be locked in a phone booth and pull the wisdom teeth out of a rabid badger, the term Elmer. That is demeaning to me, to ham radio operators, because anytime the John Q. public thinks of ham radio operators, they think of some bespectacled old guy pushing on the J38 key who's just an oddball in society, kind of a hermit type of guy. Oh, don't go over there. He's a ham radio operator. He messes my TV up. And, that term Elmer just grinds my cook.
I hate to say this. I use the term an awful lot, but frankly, I don't think I ever heard the term Elmer until when I got back in myself, probably in the 2008, something like that. So it seems like that term was actually a relatively new term for a ham radio operator.
Right. It came from a QST article or editorial, and the ham radio guy said that when he was getting his novice, the neighbor guy helped me. His name was Elmer. And that's how, I was Elmered. So that's how it kind of started. And I'm sure there's probably more details to it than that, but that's just of how that phrase goes. But I just don't like that.
So rather than have you pull the teeth from a badger in a phone booth, did you have any mentors at all that might have helped you?
No.
So we're pretty much on your own from the very beginning.
Yep, I'm self-taught electronics.
Once you got your novice license, what was your first rig?
Actually, I homebrewed my first transmitter, and it was built on an aluminum chassis, a 17-inch chassis, 3 inches high and about a foot deep. It had 3 tubes on it. It was a sweep tube, had a 6LQ6, I think, and an oscillator. And I can say with utmost certainty, I am probably the only novice in 1975 who worked, I can't say I worked all states, I worked 48 states from a WUS award with official observer reports.
Oh, that's very funny. I mean, there should be it seems to me that you should have an award from some official body where you actually turn the official observer reports in instead of the QSL cards.
Yeah, well, those have went through too many moves and too many long boxes gone. But, yep, I think it was North Dakota and Delaware. The only two I did not get official observer reports for. But, yep, everyone else, the other states except for those two, I got an official observer report.
So you had a little bit of chirping or splatter?
Oh, you name it. FMing, chirping, band drift, out of band. I mean, you name it. And I replied to every one of them. And as I'd get one that said it would chirp, then I'd dig out the 1975 edition of the ARL handbook and find out why it was supposed to chirp. Then I'd correct it. And that thing, I should have kept it, but boy, that was a flaming piece of crapola. But yeah, I had 2 crystals, I think, and then at the time, I ended up, the novice rules changed, and you was allowed crystal control, or VFO control rather. And then I had an old Heathkit VF1 VFO. That's where most of my drift and chirp came from when I hooked that thing up. But I had a blast. Every day I'd get a handful of QSL cards and 4 or 5 official observer reports.
Well, that's pretty cool. So your favorite mode then was CW?
Yeah, well, that was the only thing you had.
That's right.
In 1975.
So when did you upgrade?
About a year later. That was, the government introduced a program in which you could go to the civil service and take your test. And so I went to the Canton, Ohio post office and took my general test. And at the time, you had to send and receive Morse code, and they tape recorded you when you'd sent your code. And I failed the general test outstandingly. I don't know if it was just a case of nerves or what, but it was bad. So I came home and I sat down and I thought, and it kind of went through my head, oh my God, I should have answered this right. Oh my God. Oh. So anyway, the first general attempt didn't work as well as I hadn't planned.
So then you restudied and went back?
Yeah, there was a friend of a friend who we went up to Detroit, Michigan, and I went up and took my general and passed the general on the second try, and he passed his general, and then he passed his FCC second-class license while he was there. He was up there all day taking tests, and while I was waiting on him, I thought I'd take the advance, and just because it was free, and failed that miserably, too. I'm not much of a test taker. So got the general, and then fast forward about a year later, another friend, he would go up every month to try to get his advance, and he'd fail every time. So he'd take a car full of us up to Detroit, and we'd take the test, and I came home with an advance. And then about 2 years later, this is when the first VEs came out, in the country, and it was at a Hamfest that I went and took my extra class and passed it on the first get-go. Now, that was back in the day when men were men and women were proud of it, and you actually had to know Morse code to pass your extra class. That was 20 words a minute, and you had to do 1 minute of solid copy. But anyway, I've got the extra class, and of course, that's the end of that. You can't go any higher than that.
You came into amateur radio rather late, in your mid-20s. Were you already on a path towards being in electronics as a professional?
No, absolutely not. It's a hobby, still is a hobby, and I ended up working in heavy industry, and never had any need for the use of ham radio in the job I was using.
And what did you do professionally in what kind of heavy industry were you in?
A steel mill. I worked in a steel mill.
And I guess they're still around.
Yeah, the facility I work at is still kicking. It's not like it used to be. And we were a cold finish mill in which our products were high tolerant, very expensive that we sold. Our products went in airplanes, Amish buggies, space shuttles, automobile, of course, farms, guns, bombs, and bullets. We did everything.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. Because when you think of, I remember in the 60s and 70s, video or actually film of what was happening in the steel mills. But it was my understanding that a lot of the steel mills in America closed up and that work went to China.
Yeah, a lot of it did. It's a very competitive, very costly business to run. A lot of environmental impacts running a steel mill. And like I said, I worked at a finishing mill, so we didn't have molten steel. We didn't have the slag and such, but we had oil, all kinds of oil. Oh, my God, we had oil. It was just mist in the air. Everything was coated with oil because our bars were shiny. You could actually shave in some of our bars. They reflected that much. Straightness, we used our bars. You can imagine a bar 8 inches diameter and 27 feet long, and it's straight to the point that has no more of a wobble than a sheet of paper from one end to the other. That's what we did.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. There's probably a lot of YouTube videos that actually show the processes of taking these bars and turning them into, various kinds of products. Let's move on, though. I was looking at your website called the Heathkit Shop. What is the Heathkit Shop?
It's a hobby.
It's not your store.
Yeah, it's just a hobby. I sell some kits for upgrading some of the power supplies. And, of course, we not only just the Heathkit, but Drake radios and the Ten-Tec, even some of the ASU stuff, some of the older stuff. I don't dabble in the Collins because there are just too many other people selling Collins upgrade pieces parts. But, I like the old radios. And it's kind of a time machine when you sit there and you look at that SB104A. And you sit back and close your eyes and you can remember looking at it in the catalog and not having the money even to buy the speaker. And now, money is a little bit more available, and you can buy the SB104 used and almost have the same enjoyment of building it yourself as by rebuilding it.
The pictures on your website are absolutely impressive in terms of the number of pieces that you have and how they're arranged and the condition that they're in. Do you now buy radios surplus or on eBay or at ham shows, and then rebuild them from scratch? Do you like rip them right down to the bolts and start over?
Buying them, all the above. But I don't do the rip them right down to the last nut and bolts, because when you get done with it, you still have a 50-year-old radio, and it's not going to really work any better. Like the Drakes, there's really no reason to sit there and tear those things down to the chassis, because if an inductor hasn't failed in 62 years, it's not going to fail tomorrow. So most of the stuff is to rebuild parts that have gone bad. Power supplies are a big thing because the electrolytics are, going on 60, 70 years old. A Drake TR3 is hitting about 70 years old now, or thereabouts, 63, 67 years old. So, electrolytics and that thing are getting kind of nasty. The newer stuff, don't get me wrong, I love to play with my Drake TR4, but there's something kind of really neat about firing up a Yaesu FTDX series and dialing up a frequency, and you're right there. I have several ICOM radios, and same thing. You turn on the ICOM 7600, and you're right there. And I turn on the Drake, and you're talking to somebody, and he'll say, WB8VGE, do you know you are 276 cycles low? And, of course, our reply is, well, does that new whiz-bang super bandmaster radio you got a RIT? And it'll say, well, as a matter of fact, I've got 16 VFOs, 4 RITs, 2 sub-receivers, and a woofer. I said, well, make my day, turn the RIT on, follow me up and down the band, because we're going to be moving.
That's very cool.
You're 270. And I have actually been told I'm 100 cycles low or 115 cycles high. Now, you're looking at a radio whose nearest calibration point is 100 kilohertz away. The dial markings are in 5 kilohertz. I tune the guy in so he sounds good to my ears that have been in the steel mill for 45 years. And you get this, you're off frequency, WB8VGE. Cool. We're not going to be here long, because as soon as this thing warms up, I'm going to be 280 cycles high. Enjoy the ride. Come along, follow me up and down.
Well, I'm looking at a picture, on your website of, looks like maybe 4 Drake R4Bs, lined up there. Do they look like that when you get them? Do you actually redo the panels once you've replaced electrolytics or broken resistors or anything else that might be in the chassis? Do you actually then do the outside refurbishing as well in order to make them look like they just came off out of the box new?
For the most part, as they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because if you go in there and start mucking around with a front panel, it's going to look like you mucked around with the front panel. So most of the time, it's just cleaning, taking the knobs off, cleaning the knobs. I have a buffer that I buff the knobs up, whiting the knob indicators. And of all things you use is whiteout, the stuff you use to correct your typewriter mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Get a whiteout pen, and you fill that crack in the pointer, and then you wipe it off in a couple of seconds, and now you got a perfectly white dial indicator again. It looks like factory. And a whiteout pen would probably do 1,000 radios. And, you can't tell that that's not factory, but it's those lines now are just nice, sharp, and bright and white. And then, of course, you get the correct filters to go behind the VFOs. And, there again, you don't start with junk either. If you got something that's got extra holes in it. Because, see, when I buy a radio, the first thing I look for is extra holes, because you can't fix extra holes. Or unusual mods, in which the guy drills a hole, puts a little toggle switch in to turn the dial lights off and on. Well, that's cool. That's useless, but that destroyed that radio. That's a parts radio as far as I'm concerned. So, kind of picky anymore with what I buy, because like the SB104s, I had close to 30 of those at one time, because I was buying them for cheap money. Now, you can't. Everybody, look at Ben's radio. The guy wants $350 for an SB104. I was paying $50 for.
So is there a market for these old radios? I mean, are there enough people out there that want them, and are there groups now of people operating the Drake Twins that they have a net or something like that?
You name it. There's a Hallicrafter's net, there's a Drake net, Heathkit net, Ten-Tec net, ICOM net, ESU net. They're all out there. You know, and ICOM made an awful lot of radios that are, you know, kind of vintage. And, you know, like the ICOM, the IC 706, good heavens, ICOM sold those things by the gazillion. And they're still sought after. And now they're 15, 20 years old, somewhere around there, and they're starting to show their age. Final transistors for those things are almost impossible to find, so you kind of know that going in, and so that's one of the questions you ask, does the thing transmit? Well, it used to. It did at one time. It did the last time I turned it on. So those all mean no.
And now this message from MyCom America. Heard it, worked it, logged it. I just looked at the amateur radio contest schedule through the end of the year. It appears that you could be busy just about every day, including the CQ Worldwide and other contests coming up. Prepare yourself for the contest season by upgrading your ham station with the latest rigs from ICOM America. According to Dr. Ulrich Rohde, N1UL, my guest in episode 208, the IC7851 is the best HF transceiver on the market today. It has the competitive edge that you've been looking for. Raise the bar and hear what others cannot with this flagship HF and 50 MHz transceiver. This is due to ICOM engineers focusing on a new local oscillator design that drastically reduces phase noise. This noise reduction and purity of LO results in an RMDR of 110 dB, allowing you to hear the extremely weak signals, making the IC7851 the perfect rig for making contacts at the bottom of the sunspot cycle. In addition, this fine rig has crystal clear LO design, spectrum scope, dual receivers, and a digital voice recorder. The IC7610 is the SDR every ham wants and just in time for contest season. This high-performance SDR has the ability to pick out the faintest signals even in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. The new ICOM IC7610 is a direct sampling software-defined radio, or SDR, that will change the world's definition of an SDR transceiver. Additional features include RF direct sampling system, 110 RMDR, independent dual receivers, and dual digicell. The IC7300 has changed the way that an entry-level HF transceiver is designed, and has set a new standard. This rig is a high-performance, innovative HF transceiver with a compact design that will far exceed your expectations. It includes RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, a large 4.3-inch color touchscreen, real-time spectrum scope, internal antenna tuner, and an SD memory card slot. No matter which ICOM rig you choose for this contest season, you'll be a winner. Be sure to check out these fine rigs at www.icomamerica.com, and when you finally go to make your ICOM purchase, be sure to tell the dealer that you heard it here on QSO Today. And now back to our QSO. Well, it seems to me the at least the generation of radios that you're working on might be using like 6146s for finals. Do you have a source of tubes, or places where you go to find tubes, and do you have a big supply of vacuum tubes?
There's a couple places I go online. I can't remember the names right now. You have to watch, though, because of the audio files, or I call them audio fools. A 12AX7 is, I think, it's a dual triode, and Drake used that in her Vox control. One was a mic preamp, and one was a relay driver. I think is how that works. I'm pulling this off memory, so I may have missed it. But it's a Vox driver, relay driver, and it's 12AX7, 12AT7, one of the others. But it's also used in a preamplifier for God knows how many audio amplifiers. And if you go to a couple online stores, that tube is $97, $135. And if you go to a swap meet, ham show, and the guy's got tubes from one end of the road to the other, and you say, I like a 12AX7. What are you, a guitar amplifier or, molar? No, I need it for a Drake TR3. That's $12. Now, if I told him I need it for my Fender amplifier, it's $69.
Do you suggest these rigs for a new ham, Or are these rigs really for, for somebody that really wants that vintage experience?
The number one reason why people collect these old things is to relive their novice day, or to have the novice station that they dreamed of back in 1968 that they couldn't afford because they were working as a caddy at a golf club. No, you do not want to sit there and dip the plate, peek the grid to somebody who hasn't a clue how to solder a PL259 on. And then, when you do get the thing up and running, have some schmuck on the other end of 75 meters tell you you're 280 cycles low. And you're drifting constantly. No, you go out there and you buy your ICOM 7300, you put your commercially made antenna onto it, turn it on, and make a contact on sideband. And that's why ham radio has, to me, has degenerated to that. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should sit there and go out there and put together a homemade transmitter and get on the air and chirp and click, but we've had a dumbing down of amateur radio here in the last, 10 years or so.
And why do you think that is? Is it because we want the numbers and therefore we've made the bar lower?
Technology. When my son was alive, I tried desperately to get him interested in ham radio. And I was down in the shack and I said, like that's Pu Zhongwang, China. And he said, no, okay, so, and he pulls out his iPhone and says, I can call anybody in the world, anytime, day or night, he says, for nothing. And he's absolutely right. There's no propagation, there's no geomagnetic storms. He's absolutely right. It fits in his pocket. And if he wanted to, he can send Morse code over to a remote station anymore. So the technology, radio is no longer magic like it was when you and I first got it. My God, you could talk to Alaska. Yeah, in the comfort of my home. Okay, I can.
But Mike, do you really believe that it's no longer magic? I somehow think it's still magic. The iPhone requires $1 trillion worth of infrastructure in order to talk from one end of the world to the other.
Oh, it does.
You don't think it's magic anymore?
No, because if you go out there to Walmart or the Mall of America and you stop John Q. Public and ask him about a ham radio operator, he don't have a clue who you are. He has no idea that we even exist. And you say something about Morse code. Oh, yeah, Morse code. You guys still use Morse code? Why do you use Morse code? And he whips his cell phone out and says, I can talk to anybody in the world with this thing. And then, of course, movies have done the same thing. One of my perfect examples I use when I give talks Dayton is the movie 2012, in which the whole world's being destroyed because the poles are being moved, and the guy's in a submarine talking to his buddy in India as the tsunami comes over the Andes, and he's talking to him on his cell phone. Now, you and I both know that's not going to work because all the infrastructure has been destroyed between here and there, but the public believed that. When the hurricane came through Puerto Rico last year, what was the first thing that everybody wanted to do? And that was get the cell phone towers up, get the satellite links back together, get the cell phone network running again. And what did the hams do? Well, we ran down there like the A-Team, dun, 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 and we hand out donuts. Now, I'm sure they did more than that.
I think, though, not to necessarily disagree with you, but it seems to me that it actually took weeks to restore the cellular operations in Puerto Rico.
Oh, it most certainly did. They didn't go down there and just flip a switch. And a lot of the people who were doing the switch flipping were, in fact, hams. Did the hams go down there and help with public service? Of course they did. But you never caught any of that on CNN or Fox News or anything. I've watched it, reports every night, and I never seen anything on any of the national news people sit there and say, "Oh, ham radio came to the rescue in Puerto Rico." Now, the ARL certainly has stuff, how we went down there and saved the day, but people just don't care anymore. It's no longer magic. It's as common as cell phones and teenagers right now.
Do you think that you might have a way to interest people in ham radio?
The Arduino and the Raspberry Pi although they're not radio, they allow for the interconnection of a radio. FT8, the mode FT8, is indicative of how the marriage of computer and amateur radio is going to be. The new radio, like that ICOM 7300, that radio is more computer than radio. So we're going to come to the point now, we're probably on the knife edge, in which ham radio repair of said radios is going to be impossible. I used to work for Apple Computer, did some repair for them, and their motto was, try this, try that, replace motherboard. And that's what's going to happen with the new radios we have right now. If you bring an ICOM 7300 or Yaesu FTDX100D, 101D, the new one, they're again more computer than radio. It's not going to be a component level repair. It's going to be try this, try that, replace motherboard. And so you're going to have to get kids interested in the computer side of that. And Ten-Tec introduced a radio several years ago that allowed you to do just that. It was an Arduino-based, open-sourced radio.
Yeah, that's the Ten-Tec Rebel, right?
Yeah, the Rebel, and it came out with the Patriot, but the company ended up getting into trouble before the Patriot really made much of a splash. But people just went wild with that thing. And that's what's going to keep the interest in young people, is that marriage of the computer technology in with the radio technology.
Now, I look at the pictures on your Heathkit shop website, and I see all of this 250, these 250-watt radios and these power amplifiers and stuff. And then I read on your QRZ page that you're a QRP operator. I mean, what's the story behind that?
Let me back up. When I was in 8th grade, 6th grade, somewhere on there, a science teacher had us outside in the playground. He had this little gizmo held in his hand. It was a couple of solar cells, and a little motor had a fan on it. Well, that just amazed the snot out of me and kind of sparked my interest. It was kind of a demo thing. And you'd put your hand over the solar cell, and the fan would slow down. Of course, he'd point it toward the sun, it'd speed up, and that was just the neatest thing in the world. Well, that kind of sparked an interest in solar power that to this very day I have. And so, flash forward to 1978. I had an HW8 I bought, brand new in a kit, and I had a motorcycle battery that I kept in a little plastic bucket. And out on the back side of the house, on the south side of the house, I had strung together 36 200, 300 milliamp cells I purchased from Radio Shack, put it in a picture frame, and I charged up that motorcycle battery with those solar panels, and that was it. Boy, you talk about the drug of choice. So not only did the QRP hit me good, but the solar power hit me good. And so I ran solar power. To this very day, I run QRP.
Can we back up a second? Are you saying
Sure.
that you took like 250 of those 1-inch square solar cells?
No, they were 250 milliamp.
Oh, 250 milliamp. Okay.
Yeah.
But
they
weren't very big. I mean, they were...
No, they were probably about half the size of a business card. And they were, broken and odd shapes. And you bought them on a pack for a couple bucks at Radio Shack. Wired them in series.
Glued them onto a board and wired them all together?
Yeah, used sticky foam, tape. And it wasn't weatherproof, and every time it looked like rain, I'd have to go outside and bring it in. But it was enough to keep that battery somewhat charged. And I knew when the battery was getting low because then I'd start getting reports of chirp on my HW8. And so I'd, hook my solar panels up and charge my battery at 200 milliamps.
So you got an official observer postcard to remind you to charge up the battery.
Yeah, every now and then. But most of the time the guy would say, you're chirping real bad. I said, oh, okay. And then I'd charge the battery up. But that kind of left me, I've started writing for, the QRP Quarterly, which is the magazine of the Amateur Radio Club, the QRP Amateur Radio Club Incorporated. International, I think that's what it is. And in 2000, the year 2000, I was inducted into the QRP Hall of Fame for the stuff I've done in QRP.
And that's from the articles that you've written for the QRP Quarterly
The articles
magazine.
and the stuff I've done for the club, and the promotion of QRP, and I penned a series of articles. I wrote the QRP column in 73 magazine for several years, and of course, to this very day, we have articles published in various magazines.
That's really wild. I mean, it's a wild thing to look at these pictures of all these heavy-duty rigs, and I don't see any pictures, at least in your website, of your QRP operation.
Oh, they're just all over the place.
Oh, so I'll have to go digging deeper. Now, it's my understanding that you actually have a little bit more elaborate solar power array now than you did before. What do you have? What do you have running your shack now?
Actually, we run approximately 70% of the house on solar. We have what is known as a solar backup. The grid is actually my backup battery, and we do about 3 kilowatt peak solar, and that's a nominal 48 volt system, and that goes into a 5 kilowatt sine wave inverter, which then operates the shack and the house and everything. The only thing I can't run is the central air. So on there, it'd be nice to do that, but I just can't right now. But
are you actually running the house on the solar, or are you selling your electricity back to the electric company?
I keep what I make, and it goes into deep cycle batteries kept in the garage. And then at night, I run. During the day, if the sun's bright and the batteries are filled, the inverter runs basically off the panels. Then at night, we go back on the batteries. And, of course, the grid operates the air conditioning.
Because one of the things we see with these solar panels here, especially these systems that are pushing data, grid tie systems, right, that they make a hell of a racket, RF racket, because of maybe the switching control or something like that that's in these wiring harnesses that go to the solar panels themselves. Are you doing something different, or are you actually using one of these commercial systems that operates in a similar way, and how do you keep the noise down?
Well, actually, I am doing something different. Because I'm using batteries, I don't have the noise generated by the inverters that normally go into the panels themselves. And since I don't have a grid tie inverter, I eliminate all that noise. Now, the charge controller is a homemade affair, and it generates no RFI whatsoever. And the only thing that makes noise is the sine wave inverters in the basement, and you have to hunt for that. Get your spectrum analyzer out and hunt for the noise for that, because it's very subdued. And with my S7 to S9 noise level here, I can't hear it anyway.
Now, I think on your Heathkit shop website, don't you have you have a picture of your inverter? Mm-hmm. Is that a product that you sell?
No. The Chinese kind of came along and just upset everybody's apple cart. I did several articles in QST on solar charge controllers that make no RFI, and I was selling a kit for those for like $35, $30, like that, somewhere around there. And the Chinese have got solar charge controllers out there right now, assembled, tuned, and tested with an LCD display for $12. Free shipping. You can't compete against that.
Well, if somebody wanted to start solar powering their ham radio shack, where would you suggest they start? There's an idea in my mind that somehow I'd like to do it, but I'm not sure that I want to cover the entire house with solar panels at first. That probably I need to gain some expertise before I start.
Get yourself a big pad of paper and a calculator. Then go downstairs to your shack and get the instruction manuals out for your radio. And you get your ICOM 7300 out there. How much current does that thing draw and receive? 1.3 amps. Okay, how long are you going to operate that radio and receive on any given night? 2 hours, 3 hours? Okay, 3 hours times that much current. That's how much you're going to have to come up with to operate that radio on receive. The tricky part becomes transmit. Are you going to transmit for 2 hours a night because you're net control of mid-cars? Or are you just going to sit there and do a couple of quick QSOs for a minute or two? Or are you going to sit there and run contesting on the weekend? And then calculate the amount of current it takes for transmit, and then the duty cycle, and then add that all up, run the numbers, then you find out how much stuff you really need. Or you can do it like everybody else does, and you buy a couple of solar panels, a charge controller, and a battery, and you run it until the battery is depleted, and you can't keep up. Then you cut back on your loads.
Interesting.
Yeah. Right now, I mean, the first method is actually the best way to do. And if you're going to something like a street light, okay, the street light takes 3.38 amps, and it's on for 10 hours a day. Well, that's 38 amp hours. So you need to have solar panels that will produce enough to replace that in the battery, plus 20% for the battery conversion, because batteries are 100%, and then add an extra 10% for wire loss, controller loss, calculate how many amp hours you need, and buy that much solar panels, and of course then you do the battery calculations. But the radio is hard because intermittent. There again, you may not operate radio for a weekend at a time, in which your solar panels, you can have an undersized solar panel, but over the course of time will fill up your battery. When, as I was saying, I don't radio much. I don't play with the radios very often. My last QSO was like a week ago, which was an FT8 contact, and then the last one before that was in April. So basically about a 3-month span, I never even turned the radios on.
And now this message from QRP Labs. After watching a video interview with Hans Summers, G0UPL, owner and chief designer of QRP Labs and its fine array of kit products for ham radio, at the 2018 YOTA Summer event in South Africa, I am convinced that QRP Labs will be one of the most exciting ham radio electronic kit destinations this year. In the video, Hans describes his approach to transceiver design, starting with his original Ultimate 3S and the yet unnamed single-band, single-sideband transceiver that will sell for under $100 US. For everyone out there that believes that you have to spend the big bucks to get into amateur radio, you should know that you can build a high-performance rig today with a kit from QRP Labs. What I have learned from doing over 200 QSO Today interviews is that the novice experience where you built your own rig and operated it to make contacts is the most satisfying first ham radio experience. Hans' kits are extremely well documented and supported by Hans and his community on the QRP Labs website. It just takes a soldering iron, some basic electronic tools, and some time to build the QCX transceiver kit for under $50 to get on the air. This full-featured kit has its own test equipment built in to allow you to align and set up this rig. All of the QRP Lab products can be enhanced with additional boards and accessories to allow you to build more rig as you gain experience. If you are a new ham, or an old ham that wants a new amateur radio experience, or even want to repeat your novice experience with the latest technology, then click on the link in this week's show notes page and give QRP Labs a visit. QRP Labs is my favorite kit company. It should be yours too. And now back to my QSO Today. Can you run any of the rigs that you've got sitting on in the pictures? Are you running those rigs on the solar power?
Yep, sure can, because the inverter takes care of it.
Okay, and if you were looking at the cost of doing solar versus just buying electricity from the power company, when you consider the deep cycle batteries and the cost of maintenance and the cost of what kind of maintenance are the solar panels themselves on the roof, in order to keep them going. Have you done those kind of cost benefit comparisons to make sure that, or do you do it for the love of solar power?
I guess you could call me one of those long-haired, pot-smoking, hippie-type, tree-hugging green freak, because I'm an environmentalist. I like doing that. As an analogy, I'm not too far away from Lake Erie, and let's say, Eric, you really like to fish, and you want to go up there and get walleye that's in Lake Erie. So you buy a boat. Well, you got to get a trailer for the boat. And then you can't pull that with a Honda, so you got to have to get yourself an F-250 to pull that big boat. There's boat license, there's boat insurance, gasoline up in marinas, about $4 more than it is on the gas station at the corner. And you go up there and you fish for walleye, and you get your 3 or 4 pound limit, and you're tickled to death, and you've got $35,000 in that setup. Well, probably closer to $55,000 with the truck to buy 4 pounds, to get 4 pounds of walleye, or you can go to the local store in Put-in-Bay and buy it for $6 a pound and get yourself 3 pounds of fish.
You're doing the solar for the love of the game.
You're doing it because you enjoy the fishing.
Uh-huh.
You enjoy messing with the boat. You enjoy sitting out there and chatting with your friends. You enjoy it. So does what I have pay for itself? On paper, probably not. However, when the grid goes down and everybody's in the dark, I'm sitting here, I turn the porch lights on because I can. And that's priceless.
Yeah, okay. Do you have a bomb shelter?
Well, I thought about having one, though, but...
I don't know whether that goes along with it or whether or not...
I'm not a prepper.
You're not a prepper.
No, I don't have nitrogen-infused green beans, and I don't have water storage. We're kind of rural out here, so I have a well, and the inverter will run the well, or run the pump. And, of course, there's enough food and stuff. I can go for probably a month without having to interact with anybody.
Do you have internet out there? I know I'm talking to you on your telephone. I don't know whether I'm calling a cell phone or a wireline phone.
Yes, yep. Yeah, we have internet. And I'm one of the few people who actually have a wired phone.
The phone company is actually providing you with phone service on a wire.
The cable company is providing me on a service with hardline.
And so you have their triple play. That includes the phone service on your cable TV service.
Right.
What's your QRP rig?
Oh, how many more minutes we got?
You started with an HW8. It's obviously evolved from there.
HW8, HW9, Argonaut 505, Argonaut 509, Argonaut 515, ICOM 70, Argonaut 2, Argosys 1 and 2, Argonaut 5, Argonaut 6.
Okay, this explains your love for Ten-Tec, because I think, besides HW8, the Heathkit, I think Ten-Tec was the only company in those days that was actually making QRP rigs.
It was because at the time it was a niche market that Ten-Tec filled up amazingly well. The Argonaut 5, the 509 is still the radio which a lot of people refer to when they compare their new stuff. And right now is a great time to operate QRP. I mean, other than the bands are kind of crappy, but there's just an absolute plethora of different types of QRP radios. YouTube brand radios. I mean, there's just L&R makes a radio. The U-Bit is coming in from India. My God, I mean, those things, they're like $80.
No, I think they're even less than that.
Yeah,
You got QRP Labs with QCX for under $50.
Yeah, right? I mean, oh my heavens! I mean, it's just an absolute buyer's choice when it comes to QRP radios right now. The KX2, the KX3. You can't mention QRP without those two guys.
Right. Do you have those?
Oh no, I don't. I never drank the L-Craft Kool-Aid. I do have a Yaesu 817. I think it's probably the ultimate radio for QRP.
Mm-hmm.
And though the KX people, it's a receiver. You know what? You're out there in the middle of God's country. You're not going to have to worry about intermodulation distortion from a kilowatt station 2 miles away.
Plus, you can do UHF and VHF. You can do satellite work from out there with the same rig.
Exactly. If the bad guys were coming over the hill, the radio I would take with me would be my Yaesu FT897. There it is. With its internal battery pack.
That's the 100-watt version of the 817, right?
Yeah, it's no longer being produced. 897.
Mm-hmm.
It has internal battery packs. It will run 100 watts. Internal battery packs, they'll do 20 watts. It has UHF, VHF, jumbo coverage receive, rah. It's got a carrying handle in it. You stick a microphone in your pocket and a key paddle in your back pocket, and you're out of there. You have everything you need except for the antenna to get on the air.
Mm-hmm.
Next one I would probably take, if I had the time, would be my ICOM 703, because it will operate all the way down on a 7.5-volt battery, which is very important when you're out there, emergency communications. Yeah, try that again. Emergency communications and power might be an issue. The 703 will actually operate on a 7.5-volt RC battery and operate good. My Argonaut 5 when you get down to about 12.3 volts, which is perfectly acceptable for a lead-acid battery, that radio quits operating. There's no audio comes out of the speakers. It's not a radio I would take out for emergency communications. No. Out there on a picnic table, sure, but not when the bad guy's coming over the hill.
Now, are you involved in emergency communications?
No, I'm not.
What's your favorite mode in operating QRP?
All CW, without the question. I mean, CW always gets through.
Have you tried any of the digital modes with the 817, or with? If you're using a QRP radio, what's the best QRP radio to use with the digital modes?
Oh, actually, there's any of them. The KX3 works great on the digital modes. The Yaesu 817, I mean, works great on JT65 and FT8. I mean, there's really nobody really makes any bad radios anymore. I mean, every one of them's got some kind of idiosyncrasy, and they've got some quirks to them. They all have. Nobody makes the perfect radio. And you hear a lot about that for the newcomers. Well, I've got, what's the best radio to buy? Well, how much money do you got?
Right. You could spend $15,000 on a transceiver.
If you've got $600, $700, get that ICOM 718. That's a very nice radio for a new guy. The problem I have is when QST will send a review and I'll pick a Yaesu FT DX 1200. I've got one of those. I paid $1,500 for it. That's not a lot of money, but $1,500 is $1,500. And they say it's an excellent radio for entry-class ham. Really? I just dumped $1,500 and you tell me it's an okay radio? Or you go up to the 7300, very, very popular radio, and they say, that's a nice radio for a beginner. Really? You just dropped $1,200 on the radio and it's for a beginner? How much do you have to spend to get a radio that everybody would say, oh, that's a good radio? $3,000? $5,000? Ham radio is an expensive hobby to get into.
Well, I can make the argument that it, in fact, isn't, but maybe it requires a little bit of expertise. Mike, well, if you had $350 to spend on a transceiver, and you're a beginning ham, so you're a beginning ham with $350 to spend, what would you buy?
I would buy a Ten-Tec Omni-C with the matching power supply, take the money I have left over, buy myself a decent wire, and build myself a off-center fed dipole, and which would give me basically 40 through 10. You're going to bounce over 30 meters, but we can work on that later. And if I had enough wire, you could get 80 meters through 10 without an antenna tuner.
Okay, and that's the one that uses like 34 feet or of 450 ohm ladder line to the center, and then.
No, it's a dipole that the center, instead of being midway between the wire, is set offset. So one side of the dipole might be, the numbers, let's say 18 feet,
right,
and then the other side has got the longer length of it. And it requires like a 6-to-1 or 9-to-1 current balance, and you can make those yourself or you can buy them. But, yeah, a Ten-Tec Omni-C with power supply, enough money left over to make yourself that off-center fed dipole, and rock and roll, and you're on the air.
Now, does that Omni-C have some kind of antenna matching in case that antenna isn't actually resonant in all these places?
The off-center fed dipole will give you very good SWR on all the bands except for 30 meters, and maybe 17. I'm sure about 17. 30 meters is a crapshoot because it hits on the odd harmonic or something. But you're going to get 80 through 10 and get good performance. And it's going to be cheap.
Would you operate the digital modes on that Omni-C?
If it warmed up for a good hour or so, yeah, you could probably get by with FT8. But if you just want to do CW and sideband, you can't beat that at all. And because it's broadband and solid state, there's no dipping the plate and peaking the grid or any of that other stuff like you'd have with some of the Drakes. And it does good 100 watts out. Very, very fault tolerant. I mean, you can have no antenna, wrong antenna, shorted antenna. It don't care. it will protect itself with the matching power supply. If I had, let's say you gave me a little bit extra money.
Let's say I have $600 to spend.
I would probably look for either a used Yaesu FT450D or maybe ICOM 718 used. Once in a great while, you'll see some of the major players and radio dealers will actually sell that Yaesu FT450D for under $500 with rebates, brand spanking new. And I would probably go with a off-center fed antenna, or if I had a little extra money, I'd probably buy a wide-range tuner and go with maybe a G5RV for an antenna. Or one of my favorites is just 66 feet of wire on both sides and feed with 450 ohms right into the back of the antenna coupler and go from there, and you get all the bands.
So essentially, you've got a 132-foot wire in the air fed with a ladder line to the tuner, to a balance tuner.
Yep, to balance tuner, yep. You know, MFJ, Ten-Tec, Drake made some really nice tuners. However, you're going to be paying extra because there's kind of it's old antique-ish and it's going to cost you more money. But, you know, MFJ makes a, antenna coupler work with that just fine.
Oh, that's pretty cool. What kind of impact has amateur radio had on your family life?
Very little. I know the wife will sit there and say, "You're down in the basement again?" Yeah. But she knows where I'm at, and she don't have to worry about me hitting the bars up, chasing women. I'll be downstairs till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with my elbows all over my arms and in the radio all the way up to my elbows, trying to figure out why this silly thing won't transmit. So she doesn't have a problem with it whatsoever. And she'll also say, I'm saying, I'm going to Ham Fest. She said, well, buy something you like. Okay, no problem there. But she likes the hobby because it keeps me from getting into trouble, I guess.
Has she ever gotten her license?
No. She has no burning desire for that. We talked about it, but she has, no burning desire whatsoever for that.
What excites you the most about what's happening in ham radio now?
Very little, actually. Well, like I said, I don't talk on it. I've gone for 3 months and not even turned one on. Although the magic's still there, the flame isn't as bright as it used to be. Typical operational in 75 meters. You dial at 75 meters, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. All you hear is static crashes. There's nobody there. And you do the old WB8VGE, anybody on frequency. And all you hear is static crashes. So you do the old CQ thing, and you let go of the microphone, and somebody comes back and says, WB8VGE, there's a net will be starting here in 5 minutes. Please move off frequency. Okay. So you don't move off frequency. You stay there, and you listen for the next hour and a half, listening to static crashes, and there's nothing there. There's no net there. Way back when, back in the 80s, early 80s, scenario, same thing, 75 meters, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm running my Argonaut 509. CQ, QRP, WB8VG, QRP, calling CQ. And this old guy come back, and I remember his call, but I'm not going to say it, but it's a W8 call. And he said, WB8VG, QRP is not allowed on 75 meters. And that was it.
Well, I remember, look, I grew up in California, and I remember listening, I'd lie in bed with headphones on to a Heathkit Mohican.
Yeah.
They had the big whip antenna that came out of the top.
Oh, yeah. Yep, got 3 of them.
Oh, really? And I'd listen to 75 meters, 80 meters at night. And boy, the band it had all kinds of nets and people talking. It was like really, really busy. Now, it's been years since I've listened to 80 meters, so I have no idea what's happening. I guess I could turn a remote SDR receiver in California to see what's there now. Are you saying that people have vacated the band at night and it's gone?
Oh, no, I'm just saying it can be an absolutely clear frequency, and you get on there and want to call CQ, 9 times out of 10, something's going to come and tell you the frequencies they use, or the net's going to start. And, of course, there's no net there, it starts. It's just some way of some guy either keeping the frequency busy for his, his buddies, or whatever reason. And then, that's upsetting for the new guy. For the new ham, that'd be really upsetting to be told, you're not allowed to talk here.
But if you're a new guy, you're going to be on the digital modes. For example, we kind of established that maybe the digital modes are where the young folks are going to go. But those aren't really QSOs or conversations. Those are, those are contacts.
Right. The digital mode, if you're a new ham, if you're an 16-year-old kid and you've got your I/O ports and everything, the ASCII code forward and backwards, you won't have a trouble with that. You get a 32-year-old guy who works in, he's a car salesman, wants to get in ham radio. He's not going to go in the digital mode fast because he can't get his computer configured to operate with all these things. You get on the QRZ help technical thing, a lot of those is, I can't get my ICOM so-and-so to talk with my signal link box. I can't get this port to talk to that port. That guy's not going to get on there and make his first contact on digital modes. He's going to go on sideband because that's where he wants to talk. He wants to talk. As a couple of friends of mine said about Morse code, or CW, says, I quit talking with my fingers when I was 3. And they don't talk. They don't use Morse code anymore, or CW. So his first contact's going to be on sideband, and he's going to be scared to death because he's going to be scared to, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and you're going to get some goof on the other end who's going to eat him up. Ham radio is the only hobby in which the amount of enjoyment you get is directly proportional to the asshole on the other end.
Wow. I don't think I've spoken to anybody in 215 episodes that has said that. That's a very interesting perspective. But again, I'm looking at the rigs you operate or the rigs you like to build, and I can see that if you're in there in single sideband and CW on 80 meters at night or 40 meters at night, that you actually could run into a lot of people that could torque you the wrong way.
Oh, it's very. I mean, you've heard about that chaos on 7200? How'd you like to be a new ham? Or how would Eric like to have his neighbor over and trying to get him interested in ham radio and inadvertently tune up 7200 and hear the crap that's on that frequency? The profanities.
I'm at the other end of the world. I'm in Israel, and every time I turn the radio on, I just hear Italians.
Yeah. Well, in the States, 7200 is accessible in 40 meters. And why the government has not gone in here and kicked some butt and take names, I don't know. Other than the fact they'll say, well, we're understaffed and underfunded. But that's just embarrassment to have anybody tune in. In fact, if I was to say anybody, I'd dial them down to the CW bands and say, Morse code is still active since, 1860. 40 meters is my band. I've got 4 square on 40. I've got, a couple of wire antennas on 40. 40 meters has always been my band. I like, the propagation is always open somewhere.
Right.
Even if it's just across the street, it's always open on somewhere. I don't contest because I don't enjoy contesting. To me, to spend $15,000, $18,000 on a new ICOM super radio to win a contest is silly because nobody cares. I don't care if Joe Schmuck is head of the section of contesting or who. I don't care. And until I watched the evening news with Lester Holt on NBC, and finally tonight, Wes Hayward, K7XQR, won the CQ International DX contest. We congratulate Les. It means nothing. It means nothing. And unless you are a contester and you love that competitiveness, knock yourself out. To me, contesting is a great way to find out those old radios I got chirp and click. Because if they do, I'm still 2 points.
But you'll agree that it's like the guy that goes out and buys the whole fishing rig to catch $6 worth of walleye.
Yeah.
That contesting is the same kind of thing. That ham radio that does contesting likes the thrill of the game.
Oh, yeah.
Optimizing the rigs and the antennas and the strategy.
Oh, there's people that just wait year after year to get on that CQ DX International or the ARL DX contesting, and you're absolutely right. People just thoroughly enjoy that. It's like a guy I knew who raced cars, and he would win his division until he ran out of money. Then when he'd get more money, he'd be able to buy better brakes, better camshafts, and then he'd move up to the next division, and then he would win that one until he ran out of money, and then he kept creeping up in divisions and more exponentially more expensive until he got to the point where he couldn't afford it anymore. And that's what contesting is. I mean, some of these guys got, 4 or 5 ICOM 15 file, I don't know what the model number of that thing is, 7800, 7810s. There's $17,000, and they've got 3 of them there. And enough aluminum in the backyard to build a 747. And to get the bragging rights because you won a contest, I guess if that's what trips your trigger, I am perfectly good with that. But me, I use the test out radios because I've never, ever, ever turned in a log, a contesting log. In fact, most of the time, if you hear WB8VGE and his serial number is 12, it will be 12 all contests long because 12 is easy to send.
What advice would you give to newer returning hams then, Mike?
You're not in Kansas anymore. The technology has changed so drastically, and there again, depend on returning hands. Did he leave 2 years ago or did he leave 20 years ago? The costs of the radios have gone up exponentially. But now that being said, if you look at a Drake Twins back in 1978, those things, you dropped almost $2,000 on a set of Drake Twins by the time you bought the...
Right, but the minimum wage in 78 was, what, $2.35 an hour?
Yeah.
Right? So it was a lot of money. That $2,000 was a lot of money.
Oh, that was a new car. That literally was a new car back in 1978. So if you look at it that way, I guess inflation-wise, it's not so much of a shocker. And I think they would be amazed at the capability of the newer radios now. I mean, general coverage receive, UHF, some of them have VHF, 6 meters built into them, automatic antenna tuners built into them. I mean, all that stuff, it would take a whole table full of radio equipment to do now what an ICOM 7300 does.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Mike, you've been a fine guest. I really appreciate the conversation in the QSO. This was a lot of fun and quite interesting, and I hope that that you feel the same way and that you also enjoyed it.
Oh, sure. No problem. I just hope that people don't mistake what I said because, opinions like armpits. Everybody has at least 2, and they usually stink.
Okay, well, I appreciate your perspective, and I like a different perspective because I think that the listeners will also enjoy a different perspective. With that, I want to wish you 73, and thank you so much for joining me on the QSO Today podcast.
Okay, no problem. 73.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Mike. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in WB8VGE in the search box at the top of the page. My thanks to both ICOM America and QRP Labs for their support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of these fine sponsors by clicking on their links in the show notes pages, or when you make your purchases, that you say that you heard it here on QSO Today. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any of the other episodes into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes page. I am grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference. QSO Today is now available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Libsyn, and TuneIn, as well as the iTunes Store. If you own an Amazon Echo, you can say, "Alexa, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn." I still use Stitcher to listen to podcasts on my smartphone. The links to all of these services are on the show notes pages on the right side. Until next time, this is Eric 4Z1UG 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.